Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack how a single, pretty radical idea from the early days of the internet went on to build one of the most powerful companies on Earth. This is the story of the Everything Store.
To really understand Amazon, you've got to understand a single choice. Jeff Bezos himself gave us the perfect way to think about this. In the end, we are our choices. This entire journey, this whole massive story, it all kicks off right there with one enormous decision.
So let's paint a picture. The year is 1994. Jeff Bezos is a senior vice president at a Wall Street hedge fund. He's doing great, right? He's on this clear path to the top. But then he stumbles upon this one single, absolutely electrifying statistic. The web is growing by 2,300% a year. Think about that number. He saw an explosion happening, an opportunity that basically almost no one else did.
So this is the moment. The fork in the road. Does he stay on Wall Street with its guaranteed bonuses and all that prestige, or does he just walk away from it all to chase this wild idea about selling books on the internet? And you have to remember, this is a time when most people had barely even heard of the internet. So how on earth do you make a decision that big?
Well, he did it by basically inventing a mental model, a philosophy for making life's biggest calls. He called it the regret minimization framework.
And the power of this framework is just how simple it is. Bezos literally projected himself forward in his mind to age 80, looking back on his life. And from that perspective, he asked just one question: which choice will I regret less? It wasn't about which choice would make more money or which was safer, but which one would leave him with the least amount of regret.
And right here, you can just see the power of asking that question. He knew his 80-year-old self wouldn't give a thought about some Wall Street bonus from 1994, but he also knew he would be absolutely haunted by the thought of missing out on the internet revolution. Once he framed it like that, the choice became, in his own words, incredibly easy, so he quit his job.
So Bezos and his wife Mackenzie pack up the car and drive across the country to Seattle to start this new company. And right from those very first days, working out of a garage, they forged a culture that would go on to define Amazon for decades.
First thing on the list? The name. Originally, it was called Cadabra, as in abracadabra. But there was a small problem. His first lawyer pointed out that over the phone, it sounded an awful lot like cadaver. Yeah, not exactly the brand image you're going for, right? So, Bezos changed it to Amazon, after the world's largest river. The grand vision was already there: Earth's largest bookstore.
The early culture was really built on a few non-negotiable ideas. Frugality was practically a religion. They famously used cheap doors with legs screwed on as desks, just to save every single penny. The work ethic was just legendary. Get this, one early employee worked so intensely that he completely forgot he owned a car. He only realized it when a letter showed up saying it had been towed and sold at auction. Crazy! Bezos also set this incredibly high bar for talent and demanded a bias for action, a value so ingrained that an employee was praised for the brilliant idea of, finally buying packing tables so they didn't have to pack books on the floor anymore.
Now, Amazon grew fast, but it was about to face its first real existential threat, the dot-com crash. And as that bubble burst, pretty much everyone was sure they were finished.
Even before the market totally imploded, the established giants were coming for them. Just 3 days before Amazon's IPO, the king of bookstores, Barnes & Noble, hit them with a lawsuit, arguing they couldn't possibly call themselves the Earth's largest bookstore. The pressure was just immense.
And the market, it seemed to agree. As the dot-com bubble burst, investors and analysts fled. One tech research report summed up the consensus view with two brutal words: Amazon toast. They were seen as the poster child for internet excess, and everyone thought they were doomed to fail. And this right here is the crucial difference in perspective. Wall Street was completely obsessed with quarterly profits, demanding returns in, 2 or 3 years. But Bezos, he was playing a completely different game. He kept insisting he was building for the long term, for decades. And despite all those toast predictions, if you had invested back then and just held on for 3 years, your stock would have been up 20-fold. He just outlasted the panic by having a much, much longer time horizon.
But just surviving the crash wasn't enough. To truly become the everything store, Amazon had to evolve from a simple retailer into something totally different, a technology company. And this is where they started building what Bezos would later call the flywheel, a self-reinforcing loop of growth.
This whole transformation was actually born out of an internal crisis. By the early 2000s, the code that ran Amazon's website was, frankly, a complete disaster. It was this messy, tangled web that just couldn't keep up with their growth. To move forward, they basically had to tear it all down and start from scratch.
And this massive reinvention led to their most important innovation ever. So first, they broke down their entire infrastructure into the simplest little building blocks you can imagine, things like computing power and storage. They called these primitives. Second, they gave their own engineers free access to use these blocks however they wanted, which unleashed this wave of internal creativity. And that led to the third, revolutionary step. They realized, hey, if our developers need this stuff, then every developer in the world probably does too, so they decided to rent out their infrastructure to anyone.
And just like that, Amazon Web Services, AWS, was born. This was the birth of the cloud, as we know it today. It became the hidden engine powering the entire next generation of the internet. I mean, think about it. Companies like Netflix, Pinterest, and the early Instagram were all built on top of AWS. Amazon wasn't just a store anymore, it was the very foundation the new internet was being built on.
And this brings us to the culmination of that original vision. With the incredibly powerful engine of AWS humming in the background, the dream of the everything store could finally, truly become a reality.
If you ever want to see that vision in the real world, well, this is it. These are Amazon's fulfillment centers. They are the physical manifestation of the everything store, a vast, intricate system built for pure efficiency and selection, where millions of items are ready to ship at a moment's notice. And the sheer scale of this growth is just staggering. As you see here, less than 2 decades after starting in that garage, the company employed over 90,000 people. Let that sink in. It had truly become a global force.
So what was the secret sauce? According to Bezos, it all comes back to 3 things they did differently: being genuinely customer-centric, being genuinely long-term oriented, and genuinely loving to invent. And he argues that, while a lot of companies might have one of these traits, very, very few possess all 3. And that brings us right back to where we started. In the end, we are our choices. The story of Amazon is a story of audacious, risky, and ultimately world-changing decisions. And it leaves us with a pretty big question for the future. What will be the ultimate legacy of the choices that built the everything store?